This one is called a Hipster Dufus, and it's a carp pattern that he came up with, and it's kind of a fun one. It's got some cool little unique ideas to it and a couple little tricks to tie in it. So let me walk you through it here. What we're going to start with is a Tiemco 2457 size 8. You know, a lot of those carp get big, so you want a nice big stout hook to hold up to them. And we're going to start off with some 70 denier UTC thread, and this is wine color. And I'm going to start this thread just about an eye length behind the hook eye. My eye lengths tend to be a little shorter than everybody else's, but just make sure you leave yourself a little space there up behind the eye. And I'm just going to dress the hook. And then we're going to install what's called a lift kit. And the lift kit idea comes from Jay Zimmerman. He wrote the book on carp flies and is a very talented tyer. And the idea of this lift kit is we're going to use two very precisely measured 030 pieces of lead wire. So I've got these both cut. They're 4 millimeters long. We've let Daryl do the work on that, and he's figured out that that's the right length for the weight that we need. But what these are really going to do is they're going to set the bead chain eyes that we put on later a little bit up and off of the hook shank to make the fly top heavy so that it always rides hook point up. So pretty crafty little way of doing this. And we're going to take these two pieces and just bind them starting right about where your thread started. So again, just a little bit behind the eye. And I'm going to tie those right on top of the hook. And just anchor those in place. And I don't really worry about covering them. And then I'll whip finish the thread and trim that 70 denier out. Now at this point I'm going to put a little bit of head cement on these wraps just to lock that in. Just kind of smear that all around. And you can see that's just created a platform there on the top of the hook. And that's going to be where we place our eyes. Now what I'm going to do next is I'm going to switch to my 140 denier thread. So this is 140 UTC. Again, in wine, we're going to use this little bit heavier thread to mount the eyes. So I'm going to start the thread just behind the end of those two pieces. And I'll bring the thread up and right up to the front. There we go, right up to the front edge of our lift kit. And I'm going to take two medium bead chain eyes. These are black, obviously. And I'm going to mount these here at the front edge of this lift kit. And I want to get them on with 2 or 3 turns one way and then 2 or 3 turns the other way. Daryl doesn't like to move those around too much, and I agree with that. And then I'll continue making those X wraps and even figure 8 wraps. The figure 8 wrap, while it doesn't actually go around the hook, what that does help to do is build up the thread between the eyes to kind of finish off the head shape. And we can come around the base of the eyes too to just lock those in so that we've got nice smooth thread between the eyes and nice smooth thread under the eyes. And then again, we're going to come in and whip finish that 140 denier thread. We only needed that to anchor the eyes in place. So now I'll restart that 70 denier. I'm going to wrap back to just in front of the point on the barb. You can see when my thread hangs down here, actually a little bit too far forward there. I want to be just in front of the point on the hook barb. And this is where I'm going to start dubbing the body. Now, Daryl has done a lot of research as he came up with this fly, and he very specifically adds a little tiny bit of dubbing at each step, and wants a very thin strand of dubbing that's very tightly applied to the thread. We're going to end up building sort of a ball shape, and the reasoning behind the very thin application in smaller increments and more of them is to keep this dubbing on the thread very tight. You can see the thread, it's not exactly in focus, but the thread shows through that dubbing. And the idea is to keep that dubbing tight on the thread so that we can build this shape. As I've been kind of playing with this fly, practicing for this video, what I found is as I make the wraps, if the dubbing starts to loosen up, I can kind of twist it back up as I go. And what we're ultimately looking for here is a body, it's sort of an egg shape. slightly tapered down at the front end. But we want it about 4 millimeters wide from top to bottom, the height, and about 3 millimeters long. So 3 this way and 4 this way. So you can see we've got a ways to go. So I'll apply another strand of dubbing. When I watched Daryl do this, he did it, I think, 5 times, 5 very thin applications. And I gotta say, I just don't have the patience for that, Daryl, so I'm gonna go a little thinner and just twist it down as tightly as I can, but I think I can get it there in less than 5 layers. But maybe you're onto something, man. So again, I'm just twisting that dubbing as I come around. And I think I'm about there. Daryl actually measures that body diameter with a ruler. I'm all for measurements, but I'm not going to measure it with a ruler. I'm going to eyeball that to about 4 millimeters. So that's where we're going to stay there. And now this is going to be the back end of our abdomen. Now we're going to dub over the top of that with a little bit more earth tone color. In this case, I started with that fluorescent hot orange, and now I'm going to take some olive. And this, incidentally, is Senyo's laser dubbing. Probably should have mentioned that a bit earlier. So this is a long fiber synthetic dubbing that's got a little bit of flash in it as well. It's actually pretty nice, nice dubbing. It goes on nicely and is easy to control. And I'm going to start to build this from just behind that lift kit. And I'm going to come about halfway up the body. And again, kind of same gig. I can kind of twist that dubbing as I go. I want to come about halfway up that orange. And I think you can actually see there's a little bit of orange peeking out on the far side of the hook there. I asked Daryl about that, and specifically he leaves that there. It's not that he necessarily tries to do that, but if a little bit of that orange dubbing shows through the olive, he likes it as sort of a little faux rib or a little bit, extra segmentation, a little extra hot spot on the fly. So if you've got a couple little spaces, don't sweat it. It'll work just fine. And we've got a pretty robust body there. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to come in with a black and white barred wood duck feather. These are in pretty short supply. You're going to have a hard time finding these. This year, 2021, has not been a good year for wood duck feathers. But I imagine you could use mallard and probably be okay. And I'm going to take 4 or 5 individual strands, a little clump like so. And I'm going to take this clump and I'm going to tie it in. I'll do this on the far side first. And I want to set those up at a tall angle, and I want them about 3/4 of an inch long. I can come in and measure this. Yeah, I'm getting pretty close there. There's 3/4 of an inch. So my eyeball measurement's pretty close. So I'm just going to tie that in with just a turn or 2. And then I'm going to take 3 or 4 more fibers. For this far side. And lay those in at the same angle to the same length. And then I'm going to make what Daryl calls a modified X-wrap. So I'm going to come over the eyes and up behind this near wing and over and behind the far wing. And what that does is going to give me a nice wide spread on those, and you can sort of manually move those around as needed. But you want them about 45 degrees to the hook shank. Like so. I don't know exactly what those imitate. I think that's a takeoff from Jay Zimmerman's Banskia bug, which is where Daryl got the impetus for this fly. So I think that's a takeoff from that, but they look cool on the finished fly, and I'm sure they add that little bit of contrast that they add. I'm certain makes the fly stand out a little bit. This is a pretty well-designed fly in that, carp fishing, you need a fly that sinks quickly but doesn't splat when it lands. And Daryl's gone to great lengths to create that. It also always lands hook point up, so it's not going to snag on the bottom. So pretty cool design. I like this one. So now for the collar, we're going to take just a natural white CDC feather here. And I'm going to strip out some of these fibers. I shouldn't say strip. I want to kind of stand them up on the feather. And I want to take about half of this feather. So I'm going to take my CDC clip, or my dubbing clip here, and I'm going to put that feather in there. You can see the strands are between the jaws of the clip, and then I'll trim out that center stem where I'm just left with the little stub sticking out. And I'll set that aside here while I build my dubbing loop. So now what I'll do is I'm going to come in and I'm going to come between the eyes and make my dubbing loop there. Then I'll cross the thread a couple times with my working thread and lock that down. And that just keeps me from building up more bulk between those eyes, which we want to be aware of. And I'll clip one leg of that in my material spring. So now I'll pick up my clip again, and I'm going to come in and I'm going to put these CDC fibers between those two strands of thread, and then remove the clip. And the trick with this, we've got a fairly long, as relative to dubbing, these are fairly long fibers, so I want to spin this kind of slowly. So I'm going to pinch below the fibers and then just let that twist work up between my fingers. And the reason I want to do that slowly is it keeps them from binding up on themselves. If you've got long fibers in your dubbing loop, you want to spin it slowly. If you've got short fibers in there, you want to spin it quickly. So now I'm going to take this dubbing loop and I'm going to start to wrap it. You can see I'm just folding these turns back as I go. I'm wrapping up toward the eyes here. And I'm going to come around with just one bare turn of thread here just to clean this up. And then I'll tie that off on top, just right behind the eyes. And I'll come in and trim my thread out, or trim my loop out, I should say. Then I'll sweep everything back, a couple loose ones there, and just clean up that head area. You really want to be conscious of your thread wraps here so that you're not building up extra where you don't need it. And then I'll jump my thread forward to the hook eye and just kind of finish off the thread head. And I'll come in and whip finish. Now when I come to whip finish, Daryl likes to do 2. So we'll give him that. Daryl also likes to add a little shot of super glue on the thread wraps right there, but my super glue is dried up currently, so there's no super glue on this one. But I am going to take just a shot of head cement here between the eyes and let that kind of work down into all those thread wraps on both the top and bottom of the hook. Kind of let that set up right for a second. You can see that'll bleed in and just evenly coat that head. I had nice medium length fibers in that feather, so I didn't really get too many of them trapped. But that is the Hipster Dufus. This is a carp specific pattern, one of a few patterns that Daryl had picked up by Umpqua Feather Merchants this year, so this one will be available here in 2022 for you to pick up a sample or pick up some and give them a try maybe before you tie some. But that's the Hipster Dufus. He also ties this in a brown and yellow version. Otherwise tied exactly the same, but yellow dubbing for the butt end and then brown for the body. But there's a couple different variations, and I'm sure you could come up with more on your own. So there's Daryl's fly. This was kind of cool. Daryl took my fly tying class in, I think, 2017, and here we are. He's an Umpqua tyer today, so that's pretty cool. I'm proud of him and proud for him. So this is kind of cool, completing that circle. Daryl Eakin's Hipster Dufus. Tie something up and go catch a carp.